When society looks at athletic giants like Marshawn Lynch, Steph Curry, or Deion Sanders, it loves to reduce them to a single script: the beast to be feared, managed, or objectified. On this episode of Black in the Stacks, I sit down with Dr. Gary F. Green II, a former college athlete turned author, to look at how these iconic figures frustrate those racist cultural boxes. We talk about womanist theological ethics, embodied spirituality, and how athletes can break free from moralized frameworks to reclaim their true physical agency. Dr. Green shares insights from his journey across sports, the Black church, and higher education, and how he incorporated what he learned from Black stand-up comedians to break down these heavy dynamics in his book, Playing the Game: Embodied Brilliance Beyond the Moral Limits of Race in Sport. The book also examines everything from the double-edged sword of athletic tropes to the revolutionary power of play. Dr. Green is a professor, consultant, and a curator of conversations that expose hierarchies of power that play out in plain sight. He is also the designer and founding director of Racial Intelligence Systems at United Theological Seminary, a three-tiered reconditioning program designed to develop racial acumen among the faculty, staff, and students. Well, hello, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing well, Marquita. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And then shout out to Jackie for
Shout
coordinating
out
and
to
putting us
Jackie.
together.
That's right. Shout out to Jackie. She is the homie and family at this point.
So yeah, we'll get right into it.
Great.
So, most former athletes, right, wind up in, some kind of capacity as commentator, host, coach. You're kind of in that, right? With like the sports medicine training kind of a
Yeah.
thing, but
Yeah.
you found yourself exploring the world of theology.
Yep.
So, can you talk a little bit about how your earlier experiences shaped your path towards bringing athletics, theology, and philosophy together to broaden societal limits?
Absolutely. And I appreciate this question because it pulls on little boy me, which was very much in like I grew up in the Black church. So that was always a part of my life, and sports was always a part of my life. I played all the sports as a kid. You know, my dad played in the NFL for a long time, so it was just part of the air that I breathed in my family. And so those two things were always true. And in hindsight, I can say I was always a nerd too, just on the undercover. And so, when of course, I never aspired to do theology. I did like writing books, doing theology, teaching. That was never in the cards. So I thought, right? I went to college to play football, and of course, throughout my time playing football as an athlete, like I paid attention to the way that people treated me. I knew I was Black early on in life. Everybody's got story about like when did you find out you were Black, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But that was always a part of my understanding, right? It was something that I always knew and paid attention to. It wasn't until I was kind of on the tail end of playing football. I went to the University of Kansas, had big dreams to follow, really kind of in the footsteps that my dad had laid out, but in my own way, and had some injuries, had some misfortune while playing football, but was still, the Black church was still a big part of my life. So I eventually, kind of my senior year at KU, um, went through the process of like being licensed and ordained as a minister, thinking that my path was taking me to pastoral ministry. And that's what got me to go to seminary school. And it was in seminary school where some of my old kind of held beliefs from childhood began to unravel, and where some of these integrative pieces started to come back, where it's like I had more questions. And so ultimately, I was hungry to continue to learn, and what I thought was a call to pastor opened up more broadly. So I went and did the PhD in theology and social transformation. And that's really where these pieces became to where I couldn't ignore. Um,
Mhm.
Thinking about Black athletes in particular, thinking about how society typically talked about Black athletes, which again was something that I was familiar with since I was a kid, because I was navigating those narratives every day. And so, and also, being a comedian at heart, growing up with an appetite for Black stand-up comedy, so having this kind of critical sensibility to want to call bullshit on the narratives that saw and I knew they weren't true, right? So yeah, thinking about just broaden societal limits, there was that part of me that was like, this is the way that we talk about Black athletes, the way that we talk about Black people is we know it's racist, but it's also not true to form when we actually look at and study people's embodiment. So
Yeah.
let me try to set the record straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And reading through, honestly, there were moments where I just kind of had to pause and I was like, let me go look this up real quick because
Yeah.
it is it it resonates so much. And like you kind of alluded to, right? Like black when did you find out you were black?
Yeah.
A lot of, people found out really early in life.
Yep.
A lot of people found out really late in life.
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, there were elements that kind of struck a chord. I didn't pursue sports as much as I wanted to. Like I think I did intramural basketball for a season, and I was like, eh.
Yeah.
Um, and but it was just, circumstances, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that plays a
Absolutely.
huge role in how we get into sports
Hmm.
as Black people.
Hmm.
And largely for me, it was we didn't have the money,
Yeah.
we didn't have the funds
Yeah.
to pursue those things. And if you grew up in a certain time frame, your mom was just like, "You gonna pick one thing, you stick to it."
That's
You know what I
right.
mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And I
Yeah.
mean that's the story for so many young Black kids is, like I played a sport and all the sports that I played were sports that didn't really cost anything to, you know what I mean? Whereas like you
Hmm.
think about sports like golf and some of the sports where we continue to be underrepresented
Yeah.
also happen to be sports where your parents probably had to have
Some
some
money.
money to
Hmm.
invest to put you in them. And so those are some of the circumstances that you're talking about, some of the layers to what I wanted to at least speak into a little bit in this book.
Yeah. And that is evidence. Like the research 100% supports the context.
I appreciate that because of where I came from and like research and writing and academia and all that type of stuff. That was some of my largest learning curve. So to hear that, I appreciate that because that was one of the pieces that I had to kind of, some of the imposter syndrome that people
Mm,
invariably go through, especially when you're underrepresented in what your field is. So which I'm
yeah,
sure you understand.
I do.
I would call you an athlete in your arena as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So
A little bit. But yeah, in the text, the theme of cultural scripts comes
yeah,
up.
yeah,
And so for those who might be unfamiliar, it's defined as shared unwritten rules and expectations that guide how people think, feel, and act
yeah,
in everyday social situations within a specific culture.
yeah.
So, what first made you aware of those hidden cultural scripts, and how does that tie into athletic bodies?
Absolutely. Great question. I can remember being a young boy and growing up in South Central San Antonio, Texas. Um, Young black athlete, so naturally there were a lot of eyes on me. And one of the things that my dad used to always say is, "Son, you have to know how to play the game." And of course, I mean, you're nodding because you already know what that means. And I knew
Mhm.
what that meant at the time. I didn't need him to interpret that for me. I knew exactly what he was talking about in terms of I have to navigate my everyday life with an awareness that there are all of these unwritten and written scripts and policies and rules by which I'm expected to play and by which other people who might not look like me get to play. Um, it was that is probably some of my earliest kind of becoming conscious of these things and the way that they play out in everyday life. But also, like I said, black stand-up comedy, because it taught me early. I used to watch BET Comic View growing up, I Def Jam, all of that. And I say this in the preface of my book, that black stand-up comedians were my first cultural commentators, from the standpoint of, like, that taught me first that all of this is made up, that the things that we do in relation to each other, whether at work, whether at home, wherever it is, we're always playing by some set of rules, and most of them are unwritten and unnamed, but we know it. We relate to it very naturally. And so it was that early kind of comedic consciousness that gave me a critical distance from reality as something that we shouldn't always take for granted. The fact that a comedian could tell a joke about something we do every single day, and it's not until the punchline that you realize how silly it is, but it's sacred when we do it, because that's the way we do it, right? So it was those early experiences for sure. And then, of course, just being an athlete, a black athlete, and getting at least two different kinds of attention because of that, and just paying attention to how these things played out when I went in certain spaces, how I was treated, what I was expected to do. And then I got very curious about performance theory when I was doing my PhD. So then studying performance, um, whether it's you thinking about stage acting, or whether you're thinking about just the performances that we do every day that are mundane. We're always performing in relation to each other, in relation to scripts. So that's kind of where that consciousness came from.
And I harken back to growing up, like in spending summers in the South, deep South,
Mm-hmm.
with my grandma.
Mm-hmm.
So like out in the country, I can ride my bike, I can go and pick
Mm-hmm.
blackberries, I can do whatever I want, right? But when it's time to go to town,
That's right.
right, right before we walk in, it's don't go in this store acting crazy, and
Yes.
it's like, okay, let me perform, let me
That's
get ready
right.
to perform.
That's right.
And sure enough, like there were people. I distinctly remember a woman, um, white woman coming, and she didn't know my grandma, but like it's a small town, like
Yeah.
you're aware. But
Yeah.
it was just kind of like, oh, you're Kita, you're this, you're that, you've grown up so big, and look, you have such pretty teeth. What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And it was just, and I couldn't react the
Yeah.
way that I instinctively wanted to. It was just kind of like a thank you,
Absolutely.
yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and then we move on. You know what
That's
I
right.
mean?
That's right.
So,
That's
yeah,
right.
a lot of us from a very early age are performing. And when can you
Right.
stop? Right? When
Right.
does it stop? Can it stop?
Or when can you perform on your own terms? Because
Yeah.
even if one of the things that I acknowledge is that even the way that I most naturally walk, right? My gait, the way, like, if I look naturally, it's gonna look similar to the way that my dad, who I grew up with, naturally walks, right? And but it's still so it's authentic. I'm not trying to put on or do this, but it's still a performance. It's still the way and of course the nerdy part of me gets into etymology. So it's like the word perform literally just means to bring something to fruition completely. So everything that we do technically is a performance. But I think about it that way because there's a range of ways that, like, white people, for example, can perform, and then there's this kind of constricted way in which black people feel free oftentimes in majority spaces to perform because of the consequences that we know come with it, because
Yeah.
of the scripts, the rules, the expectations. And so I wanted to try to give language to that in this book because it plays out like muscle memory, but we don't
Mhm.
often have an opportunity to really pull back and think about it or talk about it.
Earlier, you mentioned a concept that's in the book towards the end, to play the game.
Hmm.
And so you highlight what happens when people feel that they can monopolize meaning or create cultures that claim superiority or supremacy in relation to other beings. Um, I was saving this question, but you brought it up, so I'm gonna ask it.
No, let's do it. Yeah.
So, I mean, we touched on it, but like in what, I guess, other ways are
Yeah.
everyday people playing these sports like political games like in their daily lives.
I would even broaden it outside the context. I mean, we could think about it in the context of like sports like, but
Yeah.
I was thinking about this yesterday, and there's so many examples. It's hard to pull on them, especially because they're so mundane. But like one example, for example, is, and this is one that we don't really question, but even stopping at a red light.
Mm,
Like that's, of course we know why we stop at red lights, right?
yeah.
Um, we know why there are street lights
Yeah.
to control the flow of traffic. We also know that there are in other countries and a growing number of the roundabouts in other countries that don't necessarily play by the same rules or logic of our stoplight system.
Hmm.
And we also know something about performance and comedy and disruption, that if for some reason all of us tomorrow decided we are no longer stopping at red lights, then the cities, the municipality, like whoever is deciding these things would have to change the system to accommodate for the ways that we are performing in relation to each other, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I decided I was not going to stop at a red light, it's not necessarily going to put pressure. It's going to have consequences for me. But like I named that example because that is how mundane it can be. That's the everydayness of this. And of course, you could think about the scripts or the kind of playing the game in the sense of playing along with it, where some people feel like when they go to their workplace they have to code switch or put on a different voice or persona,
Yeah.
which by the way is an intelligence. Some other people, even when you move between like your auntie's house or your cousin's house, right,
Yep.
or your mom's house, or like, we know entering into these spaces how we should move a little differently. And I think that really speaks to the everydayness of what I'm talking about as it relates to like the way that we all play these little political games. And of course there are some that are more fraught, like in public when I get pulled over by the police, there are ways that I know I should and should not act despite the way I might feel, because I've been pulled over several times for not doing anything. I've been followed around in department stores when I was a kid, and like you said, when you went into the city, you felt a certain way because you knew like there's something wrong about this interaction, but you
Yeah.
knew you practiced restraint because of the possibility of what could happen if you didn't. Um, and so I think a lot of, for my work, at least in this book, was really, and this is really where the comedic comes in heavy, is just trying to invite people to see like it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go and not stop at red lights tomorrow all of a sudden, but it does mean that you're going to think about it when you do, to understand we're always playing along with something, um
Hmm.
or or we're playing it in the sense of like the double entendre, flipping it on its head. And we do that all the time as well. Like we're at work and we're being quote unquote serious, and I wink at you or I crack a joke or something like that, and it's just that little disruption that opens up a little portal for us to have fun in the midst of what might be boring.
Hmm.
um those are those little moments where somebody has decided, you know what, I'm not about to play by these rules.
The example that you gave of the red light and the roundabout, is so timely, like, it's so weird. Um, but well, not weird. I would say, ordained, divine, because
Synchronous, yeah.
yes, yeah, because I went back home to Georgia for a visit, and a lot of the area that we traveled through, it used to be red lights, but they're roundabouts now.
Interesting.
They're roundabouts now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And I think there's studies that show like the amount of accidents at roundabouts. And don't quote me on this, but I've seen this somewhere where there are fewer accidents,
yep.
generally speaking, where there are roundabouts than stoplights. And I mean,
Mhm.
this makes sense because when people are given the freedom to flow and kind of find rhythms, create rhythm, rather than when people are being controlled in a certain kind of
Yes.
way, we're not designed to be controlled
Control.
in that kind of
Mhm.
way. Like we all have enough intelligence to feel in relation to each other how we can and should move. And so it makes sense why those statistics tell that story.
So it is a sports book in essence, right? So you do mention, some heavy hitters, some well-known names in the sports world. So
Mhm.
Marshawn Lynch is mentioned, Steph Curry, um, some people from the WNBA, tennis,
Yeah. Yep.
Deion Sanders. I gotta
Yeah.
shout out Deion. That's on the
Absolutely.
Falcons.
Absolutely.
I love them to death,
Yeah.
even though they disappoint us, the Hawks too. But Georgia girl, I gotta support the home team always.
Always, you got to. That's how I
Got
am with
to.
Spurs, and I'm glad that we're good again now. Because for a
Yeah.
while there, it was touch and go.
So when you reference them,
Mhm.
there's strong emphasis primarily on Black male athletes.
Right.
And
Right.
so, I mean, naturally, that comes from you being a Black male athlete.
Yeah.
But how do, those heavy hitters, how do they challenge the narrative people project onto athletes?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Let me first say that um, for this book and for what I wanted to demonstrate, there are any number of athletes I could have used, and my original plan was to use Marshawn Lynch, Steph Curry, and Serena Williams. The
Mm,
editorial board at the publisher that I worked with, and it was actually among the editorial board, it was the one womanist editor who sent feedback back, and she suggested just to focus the book on Black men, which is what. But you see in chapter 5 in the what I call the plot twist, like I, you know, I had to say what needed to be said. And I also have an article coming out where I treat Serena Williams in relation to this more specifically. But I will say that Marshawn Lynch, Steph Curry, and Deion Sanders each epitomize a unique way that they, but also other Black athletes, disrupt different dimensions of what I call the colonial or the cultural logic of white supremacy. We're thinking about scripts and rules and expectations. Like, then we're also talking about logics where whiteness or white supremacy, there are certain logics that it moves by that Black people are expected to participate in or play along with. And so when I think about Marshawn Lynch, I think Marshawn Lynch really disrupts the cultural logic of white supremacy. And I also say the way that I moved through them was I intended to be kind of from the surface of Black athletic skin all the way down to the kind of psycho spiritual reality. So I began with Marshawn Lynch because he disrupts this kind of surface cultural dimension of white supremacy, criminalizing narratives, that game, right? And he plays that game in plain sight, flips it on its head in ways that people really appreciate, and then in fact in ways that open up possibilities for other Black athletes who have been tired of being criminalized to find different ways not to participate in those stories, whether it's in the form of giving interviews or what they say when they're giving interviews, which, giving interviews is a mandate. And the brilliance of Marshawn Lynch in that case was finding a loophole to be like, okay, fine, I'll sit here for these 3 minutes or however long it is, and still disrupt this game, this practice. For Steph Curry, it disrupts the economic and the embodied logic of white supremacy. And what I mean by that is, Steph Curry is 6'2", maybe, light skin, comes from a two-parent household, was overlooked during the time of the draft because of his size, because of his style, all of those kinds of things. In this way that he doesn't register to the white kind of athletic appetite, and specifically the ways that, like, the recruiting apparatus, whether you're thinking about college or you're thinking about the pros, are looking for bigger, blacker, stronger, faster, right?
Yes.
And
The
that's the way
the beast.
the beast, exactly. And that's the logic by which these scouts, that's what they look for, that everybody's looking for. It's an arms race basically, among black bodies, which also points to the kind of dehumanization that is very normal and unquestioned in the sports world, especially the professional sports world. But now in college, given the NIL reach and reaching beyond in high school and so on and so forth. um and so here comes Steph Curry, you know. We see the ways that he kind of proved the naysayers wrong, but also the fact that he's changed the logic of the way basketball is played, which
Mm-hmm.
Shaquille O'Neal acknowledges this, where now all of a sudden you have people coming down and trying to pull up, and kids training themselves to be able to shoot 30-foot jump shots. And that's the norm. Before Steph Curry and the way that he normalized that way of playing basketball, that was not necessarily the norm. Of course, there was
Mm-hmm.
some shifts, but he is one athlete you could point to and say, this the way that this person has so mastered or embodied in a brilliant way the logic of basketball has made the logic of basketball change. And so he also, in doing so, disrupts this colonizing logic by which whiteness and white structures assume, oh, we got to have the biggest, strongest, fastest, read blackest, most beastly athlete. Then you move down to the psycho spiritual dimensions where Deion Primetime Sanders, which was one of my favorite chapters to write because of the way that he does not cave in like like this society expects so many black men and women to cave in from the sense of their personhood, right? And not only does he not cave in, but he actually flexes in the face of it. And so even the creation of the persona primetime is a conscious deployment that he talks about very publicly, in the sense of like whenever he is engaging with what I would call, he I don't know that he calls it this, but he's aware of it because he's talked about it in other ways. But when he's engaging with kind of white structures or white society or whatever, right? This kind of dominating force, he shows up as prime time when he knows that the expectation is for him to show up with this kind of humility because, of the power dynamics that white men with clipboards had in relation to black athletes when he went to the draft or to the combine and then eventually
Mm-hmm.
got drafted. Um, and I think that there are some things that chapter in particular points out about persona, about belief, and about the ways in which flexing actually embodies a kind of healing mechanism that we all embody. Um, both for ourselves, but also in relation to other people who might be watching us, who might be waiting on permission to be themselves and not feel like they have to code switch off their brilliance.
That code switching conversation, it's like it's constantly in the zeitgeist. Like
Yeah.
it's constantly being discussed. Um, I would put it up there almost with the there can only be one kind of
Hmm.
thing when it comes to celebrating either a black man or a black woman that's excelling in
Absolutely.
something.
Absolutely.
Um, and I'm seeing it now with oh Zendaya.
Yeah.
They've they platformed her so much, they discounted her as a Disney kid,
Sheesh. Yeah.
and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And has escaped every box they tried to put her in. She's like, "No, no, no, no." And even now, because she's so keenly aware that that's what happens to Black people in this Hollywood world, she's already taking steps and strides to combat it.
Absolutely.
So
And so think
and
about this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
I was just gonna say, think about the space that creates for other people, right? Um, and of course there are nuances there, but for like when somebody that's now as big as Zendaya is, it's too late now for them to try to box her in,
Mhm.
because she has the attention, the support of so many people. So now she in a way that's similar to prime time, she can kind of say and do what she wants.
Yep.
And now these structures are going to the chances of them bending to her brilliance are greater than than if she was not as big as she's gotten, right?
Hmm.
And thank goodness that she is not, that she's intentionally trying to disrupt some of these narratives, because oftentimes that's what happens. You get big and it's like, look, I'll give you this amount of money if you just play this game, and
Hmm.
but there are consequences for other people to doing
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to touch on the concept of beast.
Hmm.
We've talked about it a little bit. In popular culture, there's beast mode,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
There's the oh, he's a beast on the court, she's a
Yep.
beast at tennis,
Yep.
referring to Serena and
Yep.
Venus, right?
Yep.
And Coco, everybody
Hmm.
coming behind Naomi, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, in the book, you state that if beast is currency, then Marshawn Lynch exposes both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me about like that beast metaphor as it relates to your book, um, but then also how society views Black bodies as beasts, um, and what does embodied brilliance sort of look like when we're freed from all of those limits?
Oh, this is a good question. How much time you got? I'm just kidding.
Hey.
Let me start my answer with why it matters. And then I'll talk a little bit about kind of how it connects to this to societal lens that I'm ultimately trying to challenge, and then the other pieces that might relate to it. What's coming up for me right now, what I'm remembering is the police report language, and I don't remember it word for word, but generally speaking, I think it was Darren Wilson who killed Mike Brown in St. Louis area.
Mhm.
Um, a teenager, yeah, he might have been larger, but a youth.
Yes.
And the language that this grown ass man used to talk about him was language that was akin to like it felt like I was being attacked by a beast, kind of, And
Mhm.
that has been the justification for a lot of mistreatment and violence toward Black men in particular, but also Black women. The way that these stereotypes, these historical tropes become justifications for treating someone as inhuman. Um, Without the recognition that the justification, like the trope itself, is a construct that has always served a kind of dehumanizing function for the logic of this country. So to talk about beast in a historical sense first is to acknowledge that in for antebellum slavery, the assumption that Black men and women, that Black bodies were chattel, is part of beast history. When
Mhm.
you think about when chattel slavery is when it becomes obvious that folks shouldn't have been doing this, right? And so then it's rendered illegal. Then there becomes different legalities and extra legal ways to still say that we want, equality, but still police Black bodies. And so Jim Crow, during
Mhm.
the Jim Crow era, is when beast takes on a kind of different shape and form, where there's still this kind of assumption of inhumanity that's imposed onto, and it becomes even more explicitly inscribed onto Black men's bodies during this time. Um, but no longer quote unquote chattel, but
Yes.
still needing to be policed by, in particular, white men, because the narrative went, these Black men are in pursuit of the purity of white women, like sexually loose, lascivious beasts. So therefore, these white men, and Dwight Hopkins, I think, calls this the kind of triangle of desire. There are different ways people have conceived of it, but essentially, to protect white society and the purity of white society, in as much as white womanhood was representation of the safety and purity of American society, then Black men needed to be lynched, because the myth was they were in pursuit of white women, when in fact what was happening more often than not is these white men were mistreating Black women, right?
Right.
But again, these tropes become justifications for justifying behavior they had already decided was necessary and needed. Okay. Then you fast forward to where we are today and the kind of the sports world and how Beast then becomes, and so all the while, even without getting into the kind of positive spins that we play into it as it relates to Beast, these criminalizing narratives, like I was talking about, like in terms of Mike Brown or Trayvon Martin or just the list goes on, Sandra Bland, there's always this kind of abiding inhuman assumption that is inscribed onto the person that's mistreated. And they're rendered beast in this way that says, you see, my mistreatment, like I would not treat a human this way, but this one is not human. So I was justified in mistreating them as such.
Yeah.
So the criminalizing narrative has been there, and we know that. What has been more slippery and seductive is the way that Beast has taken on this very um kind of, so that's the kind of fear component. There's a fetishizing component too. And this is where I was talking about how Marshawn Lynch exposes both sides of the coin from the standpoint of being feared based on these criminalizing narratives, but then also being rendered a fetish from because of what he can do on the field, or a fetish like so many people fetishize black masculinity in this country in this mode of beast. I mean, you could even, it's even pornographic oftentimes, right?
Mm.
And so the normalcy of that and the fact that it pays and it plays so well, it becomes seductive to the point where I can remember when I was a young athlete, if somebody called me a beast, I was like, hell yeah, like I'm doing my thing without recognizing that you can be feared or fetishized. Or another way of saying that is you could be rendered subhuman or superhuman. Either way, you do not have space to be human. And so if I'm your fetish, then when I am behaving or embodying a part of my being, my life that doesn't fit your fetish, then I'm discarded. Or if I'm doing something that even hints like I am embodying like a criminal, then I'm discarded. There's no range, there's no space within which to be fully quote unquote human, which is part of the reason why one of the things I wanted to do in the book is even challenge the technology and the language of human itself. Because that has been fraught ever since, like we fought over that category, but that category has never been for black people in this country or the Western world in general, right? And so I could do all the things that you say qualify me to be human, and you're still gonna call me a beast, right?
Yep.
And so I wanted to play on the popularity of Beast. One, because it is so seductive and recognizable, but two, because it does contribute to these narratives that continue to be used to undercut basically the brilliance that black people embody. Because even in the best case scenario, calling me a beast does not acknowledge the intelligence that I'm embodying in order to get to a place where you even want to call me a beast.
Mm-hmm.
What Marshawn Lynch is doing on the field, what Steph Curry is doing on the court, what Deion Sanders has done on the field, court, and everywhere else that he's been, what Serena Williams is doing, what I mean, the list goes on. We're witnessing deeper levels of intelligence, but because it's sports or because these are quote unquote beasts, it doesn't register as intelligence. And so we don't treat it as such. And so when you ask the question about kind of what does embodied brilliance look like, or outside of that trope, one, it looks like an acknowledgement that what I have been conditioned to believe is just pure physicality, just straight raw talent, God given, no character needed, no cognitive intelligence needed. All of it's actually intelligence. It's embodied intelligence, and it is, so it looks like a changing of the conversation of the nature of intelligence on one hand, but also it for black people, it looks like us being able, one, to know that we're already brilliant, and two, to be able to, I mean, how differently would I move? How differently would I have moved as a child if I knew I was brilliant? If I knew that what the way that I show up in the world is a certain kind of like intelligence that has an effect on every room that I go into, and it doesn't just have to be in the context of sports. how might I translate this intelligence to the academic world, for example? If I knew, like, okay, I was him on the field, I can be him over here too, right? And that's
Hmm.
something that, going through the process of writing this book taught me. But one of the reasons I wanted to write it in this way is so that other Black people in particular to read this, and specifically athletes, to be able to see, like, yo, you're already brilliant. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what we gonna do with it?
That notion of how you would move differently as a youth if you had known, is a practice that I'm trying my best to instill in my child.
I love that.
Um, and even in pre-K, right?
Yep.
Um, the the comparisons that she's experiencing on
Yep.
her,
Yep.
and then come home, well, you said my picture looked like this, and then the teacher said it was great, but then my friends were like it's ugly, and having to combat that. And I was like, well, art is relative, right?
Mhm.
Art is open to interpretation. Like what
Mhm.
someone else sees in a piece is not going to be the same thing that you see in your piece, right? Like
That's
it's your
right.
baby.
That's right.
What I see in it, of course, it's pride, it's admiration. You're my kid, right? But also, I can recognize your natural ability to draw anything, like from memory. She can from
Yeah.
a very early age, and
Yep.
so
Yep.
we're nurturing that. Her father and I are
Absolutely.
nurturing that. We have a room full of just like markers and paint and her canvases from when she was 3. So
Yeah.
we're nurturing that for her, but still,
That's so important.
yeah, but still she gets the I'm not good enough. It doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like that, and it doesn't have to.
That's right.
It doesn't
That's right.
have to. So yeah, it's important that we do that because yeah, the same way, like if I had known, um, I'll liken it to my career. If I had known earlier that librarianship was a pathway for me,
Yeah.
um, I probably would have pursued it earlier.
Yeah.
But I also like to think that everything that happened prior to me getting that
Still preparing
informed.
you. That's right.
Yeah, it informs every step that I made after, even down to, leaving the traditional library space.
Yeah.
It was such a it was a hard decision to do, um, and the reasons leading up to it had filled me with such anger,
Yep.
um, and I only recently let it go.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
Um, but it and once I let it go, it was just like clarity like I had never
Yeah.
experienced before.
I appreciate that perspective too, like that, because both things can be true. On one hand, I could think in hindsight, and maybe not even in hindsight, but like for my kids as well. Um, just telling them they're brilliant, right? Because of yeah, I just imagine the compounding effect. Like if life really is this kind of just this ongoing game, and if we really are performing our life every day, like we're bringing life to fruition every single day, then I can think of the compounding effect that it has on somebody like, say, 7 years old that hears every day that they're brilliant, or hears every day that they're beautiful, or that they are smart, or that their art is, you know what I mean? Like that hears
Yeah.
those things, and they carry that with them in their everyday performance of life versus the same kid that is never told that, then it's just like
Mhm.
how how different would things look? But then on the flip side, the I think what feels to me like the relief of knowing we're still in, uni still got me. God still, I'm still
Yeah.
being prepared for what I'm engaging, right? I could think about like if I knew I wanted to go into academia, I would have actually read books when I was a kid or growing up, right? But in a strange way, playing sports prepared me for my life as a quote unquote academic or as a scholar, because it might have taken me longer to figure out how to do this or what language, what the language game of the academic world, but I know how to train. I know
Mm-hmm.
how to compete. I know how to, I know how to believe in myself. So there are certain things, certain qualities that being an athlete gave me, that if had I been an academic all my life, perhaps I wouldn't have had, right? And
Yeah.
and if nothing else, I get to be the kind of academic that I am, which is very unique. um, and but that's kind of that's part of the story of embodied brilliance. Like we embody we embody so much intelligence as a species, as a people, black people.
Yeah.
Um, like there are layers to it that are not talked about in society because we have things like the IQ test that's meant to teach us that intelligence is a quotient that you either kind of have or you don't, or you have it in this amount of measure. No, there are multiple intelligences, and there are more than we've yet learned to talk about. The fact that you and I exist suggests that you are an intelligence. I am, like, in terms of this creative problem solving sensibility, or in this, if I'm turning on the comedic mode, this creative problem creating sensibility, because intelligence also can create problems or create questions where there seems to be something like a settled understanding. We do that every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think making legible the intelligence that we already are can go a long way in terms of shifting things, in
Yeah.
society.
We are getting close to time, um, but I have a couple more questions
All
that I
right.
want to ask of you. So these
All
are
right.
kind of meant to be rapid fire, but you know, expounding is always
So
welcome.
don't talk too much, Gary. Is what I'm just kidding. No,
Listen,
I got you.
I'm a solo. Listen, I schedule, I record, I edit,
And
I
I
promote.
applaud you. Yeah, I
The
applaud you. You're doing a
one
good
woman
work.
band. Thank you,
You're
thank
doing a
you,
good work. And congratulations on the awards and the recognition that you've gotten
thank you,
in terms of what you're doing as well. Yeah.
thank you. So, if you had to use three words to encourage listeners to buy their own copy of your book, borrow the book, or if it's not available to borrow at their local library, encourage their library to purchase a copy, what are those words and why?
I'm thinking in terms of like a 3-word phrase.
Mhm.
So not separate words, but one is you're already brilliant. And that this book will, because it seems like it's about sports, but it's really about something deeper than that. And sports
Yes.
is kind of the hook, it's the cover, if you will.
Hmm.
And so you're already brilliant. And I think that this book will demonstrate like why, how, and why you are, right? Hopefully it'll make space for you to get in touch with your own energy in that way. But another one I would say is that play is revolutionary.
Hmm.
And it's a major theme in this book, that play, not from the standpoint of let me play along with, but the power of playing in this kind of satirical way,
Yeah.
is revolutionary. And
Hmm.
I like to write, or is revolution, and I like to put the R in parentheses on revolution, because it's a play on, like, it's also a part of our evolution. Like, we need to be able to disrupt systems so they can get recreated, which is why play is called recreation, in order to keep unfolding life toward more
Hmm.
life. And so those are the two kind of 3-word phrases I would use. You're already brilliant, or play is revolution. And this book will help you understand why and how.
Yeah. And that idea of play, for me, when I was going through the text, I spent some time as an educator,
Hmm.
and kind of spending time with my child's teachers when she was like pre-K, all
Yeah.
of that. But the idea of dramatic play
Yes. Oh my God.
came
Yes.
came to mind as well. Like it's important for um, kids and adults in some cases, like to
Yes.
experience that dramatic play. Like you're trying something on to see how it fits, and to see how it makes you feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a key part of, like, just human development.
Hmm.
And I'm glad that you mentioned for adults too. One, I think we play for the same reason as adults.
Hmm.
especially any kind of like role player, when you're playing like there's somebody else or whatever. Like
Yeah.
there are all kinds of healthy kind of psychological, emotional, regulatory benefits to play in that way. And but we often think about that as, oh, that's something that kids do. No, one, kids need to do that to develop healthily. Two, adults need to keep doing that because it is healthy for us too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. What creative works are currently occupying your time? What are you reading, watching, listening to?
Well, I'm teaching right now, so it's that part has been a little bit of a struggle. But I will say my next project is a creative work that has my attention right now. I will say also, um, there are a couple books I'm reading. Shonda Prescott Weinstein's work I'm reading right now. I just got done reading her couple of her chapters. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the book right now, but I'm seeing it in my head. But two chapters that have to do with the physics of melanin, and this chapter entitled "Black People Are Luminous Matter." She's like an astrophysicist, cosmological, scholar.
Mhm.
Um, and a show that I just started is a show called Foundation on Apple TV. A creative friend was telling me about it. It's kind of sci-fi, but it's also got a political theme to it. So I have
Mhm.
just started episode 1 last night and didn't finish. I got about 15 minutes left. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that opens up.
What's one thing you will always be proud of?
Definitely the kind of dad that I am. My kids mean the world to me. My kids will always have priority in my life. I remember when I was in my PhD program and hearing peers or colleagues talk about how much time they didn't spend with their partners or families or whoever because of this PhD process. And it wasn't like that for me. I was never going to sacrifice relationships, especially my closest family relationships, for for anything really. So I would say definitely the kind of father that I am.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself?
Probably that I am somewhere on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And I say you might have heard an R in there, an autism
Mm,
spectrum.
mm,
I'm working on a theory
okay.
about the spectrum, and I have problems with the categorizations,
Yeah.
problem with even the idea of neurotypicality or neurodivergence. And so my next book, I will open up into this a lot more. So I'm researching right now, but the way that we talk about people on the autism spectrum, the way that we talk about ADHD, the way that we talk about mental health, or just how people's minds are configured in general, I think is problematic in the same way that Beast is. It
Yeah.
it pathologizes even when it's not trying to. Diagnoses are delimiting, and they also don't acknowledge, like I said earlier, that the nature of intelligence is plural. So our minds are not supposed to function the same way, nor do they. um and I think that there's some I'm making some kind of spiritual and artistic connections to autism in specific, or in particular. But yeah, I would say learning that about myself, but also being grateful that I've been undiagnosed for, well, I'm 40 now. So never never having been put in a box. So having had an opportunity to get to know how my own mind works and embrace it and to hone it in that
Yeah.
way, before anything that I learned about it that could have potentially squeezed me or pathologized me or made me feel like I was other or not smart or something like that, right? And so now I'm like, shit, I can wield it with confidence in the same way that I see people like Eddie Murphy. There was a documentary I saw about him where he was talking about some of his quirks, and it
Yeah.
was just like, all right, I'm seeing some connections here. So
And then lastly, where can the people find you online if they want to, just follow, your process, your work, or just connect with you further?
yeah, I'm on Instagram and Threads. Dr. Green Ideas, all one word, on Instagram and Threads. And then I'm also on Substack, and I've got a YouTube page, and both of those are called The Green Idea. And I shared with you, I started a consulting company years ago, and it's kind of more of like a creative approach to training attention. And that's greenideasconsulting.com. And so all of that stuff is on my social media.
This has been more enlightening and enjoyable than I could have ever imagined. So thank you for spending a little time with us today. And yeah, when that next book is ready, tell Jackie to give me a call.
I'll let you know, definitely. And thank you, Marquita, for having me. I very much enjoyed this conversation.
For more information, you can visit us online at www.blackinthestacks.com and find us on most social media platforms at Black in the Stacks.